Thomas Steele's fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, his eyes fixed on the stream of data flooding the translucent screen. The soft hum of his experimental water purification system filled the spacious apartment, a constant reminder of the task at hand. Outside, the neon-lit megalopolis of New Horizons stretched as far as the eye could see, a sprawling testament to humanity's relentless expansion. "Come on, you stubborn piece of—" Thomas muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. The system's efficiency had plateaued at 98.7%, and that last 1.3% felt like an insurmountable chasm. He had been working on this project for months, pouring every ounce of his considerable intellect into solving the world's water crisis. A sharp buzz from his comlink broke his focus. Thomas glanced at the caller ID and groaned. Dr. Evelyn Shaw, his research supervisor at the Institute of Environmental Sciences. "Steele here," he answered, trying to keep the irritation out of his voice. "Thomas, where's that progress report? The board meeting is in 2 hours, and I need those numbers." Dr. Shaw's clipped tones left no room for argument. Thomas's stomach dropped. The report, he'd completely forgotten about it, lost in the labyrinth of his calculations. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it, Dr. Shaw. "You'll have it in 30 minutes, Thomas replied, trying to sound confident. "Make it 20, and Thomas, this better be good. The funding for your project hangs in the balance." The call disconnected, leaving Thomas in stunned silence. He glanced at his unfinished work, then at the blank report template glowing accusingly on a secondary screen. With a frustrated growl, he pushed back from his desk and stood up. "I need a shower," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Clear my head." The bathroom was barely large enough to turn around in, a concession to the premium placed on living space in the overpopulated city. Thomas stripped off his rumpled clothes and stepped into the shower stall, sighing as the warm water cascaded over his tense muscles. He closed his eyes, letting his mind wander. There had to be a solution, some variable he hadn't considered. Maybe if he adjusted the nanofiltration matrix. A sudden tremor shook the apartment, nearly knocking Thomas off his feet. The shower's control panel flickered, then erupted in a dazzling array of colors he had never seen before. The water pressure intensified, becoming almost painful against his skin. "What the hell?" Thomas shouted, fumbling for the shutoff valve. But before he could reach it, the water changed. It no longer felt like liquid, but something far more viscous and electric. The very air seemed to crackle with energy. In a blinding flash of light, the shower stall transformed. Where the back wall had been, a shimmering vortex of blue-white energy now pulsed. Thomas stood frozen, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Then, impossibly, a hand emerged from the vortex, a distinctly feminine hand with long, elegant fingers and skin that shimmered with a faint blue iridescence. The hand was followed by an arm, then a shoulder, and finally, she stepped through the portal. In Thomas's world, everything tilted on its axis. She was humanoid but unmistakably alien. Her skin was a pale, luminescent blue, seeming to glow from within. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, were a deep swirling violet. A mane of silvery hair cascaded down her back, moving as if suspended in water. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Thomas naked and dripping, his mouth hanging open in shock, the alien woman, her exotic features a mix of curiosity and something akin to relief. "You are compatible," she said, her voice melodic and slightly accented. "I have searched so long." Thomas's scientific training finally kicked in, overriding his paralysis. What are you? How did you get here?" The alien woman tilted her head, studying him intently. "I am Seraphina, last survivor of the Aquarians. My world is gone, destroyed by our own folly. I have traversed the cosmos seeking a genetic match to preserve my species." She gestured at the still swirling portal. "Your device resonated with our technology. It created a bridge." Thomas's mind raced, trying to process the implications. An alien? An interdimensional portal in his shower. It was beyond fantastic, beyond his wildest dreams or nightmares. "I'm Thomas," he managed, suddenly acutely aware of his nakedness. He grabbed a towel, wrapping it around his waist. You said I'm compatible? Compatible for what, exactly? Seraphina's expression softened, a mix of hope and something like shy embarrassment crossing her features. To create new life, to give my people a future. The full weight of her words hit Thomas like a physical blow. You mean reproduction with me? Seraphina nodded solemnly. It is why I have come, why I have searched for so long. You are the first I have found whose genetic structure aligns with ours. Thomas's head spun. This was too much, too fast. Part of him wanted to laugh hysterically at the absurdity of it all. Another part, the scientist in him, burned with curiosity about Seraphina, her species, the incredible technology that had brought her here. Yet another part, a part he wasn't entirely comfortable acknowledging, couldn't help but notice how hauntingly beautiful she was. This is a lot to take in, Thomas said, running a hand through his wet hair. I have so many questions about your world, your people, how you got here. Seraphina's eyes lit up with an almost childlike enthusiasm. And I will answer them all, Thomas of Earth. But first, she glanced at the still active portal. We must close the gateway. Its energy signature may attract unwanted attention. As if on cue, a distant siren began to wail. Thomas's blood ran cold. The tremor, the energy spike. Of course, it would have been detected. Quick, he said, grabbing Seraphina's hand without thinking. Her skin was cool and slightly slick, like touching living silk. We need to shut this down and get you out of sight. I have a feeling things are about to get very complicated. Seraphina nodded, her expression grave. You have no idea, Thomas of Earth. No idea at all. As they worked to deactivate the portal, Thomas's mind raced. His life had just taken a sharp turn into the unknown. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The siren grew louder, and Thomas's heart pounded in his chest. He had to protect Seraphina, had to keep her hidden. The consequences if she were discovered. He didn't even want to contemplate them. There, Seraphina said, as the portal finally flickered and died. It is done. Thomas nodded, already formulating plans. Okay, we need to get you somewhere safe. My bedroom, for now. I'll deal with whoever's coming. As they hurried out of the bathroom, Thomas caught sight of his forgotten report, still blank and accusing. He almost laughed. Somehow, he doubted Dr. Shaw would accept, I met an alien in my shower, as an excuse for missing the deadline. The pounding on his apartment door made them both jump. Environmental Protection Agency, a gruff voice shouted. Open up. Thomas squeezed Seraphina's hand reassuringly. Stay here, stay quiet. I'll handle this. As he moved to answer the door, Thomas's mind raced. How could he explain the energy readings? What story could he possibly concoct that wouldn't raise suspicions? He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Whatever happened next, he knew his life had changed irrevocably. For better or worse, he was now part of something far bigger than himself. With one last glance at Seraphina, her alien eyes wide with a mixture of fear and trust, Thomas opened the door to face whatever came next. Thomas's heart pounded as he faced the stern-looking EPA agents at his door. He forced a smile, acutely aware of Seraphina hidden just meters away. Gentlemen, what seems to be the problem? He asked, striving for nonchalance. The lead agent, a grizzled man with cybernetic implants gleaming at his temples, fixed Thomas with a penetrating stare. We detected an unusual energy spike in this vicinity. Care to explain? Thomas's mind raced. Oh, that? Just a small miscalculation with my water purification system. You know how temperamental experimental tech can be. The agent's eyes narrowed. We need to inspect your equipment. Of course, Thomas said, stepping aside. Though I'm afraid it's a bit of a mess in here, you know, scientists. As the agents swept through his apartment, Thomas held his breath. They poked and prodded his equipment, ran scanners over every surface, but they found nothing out of the ordinary. Seems clean, the lead agent grudgingly admitted. But we'll be keeping an eye on this location. Any more mishaps, and we'll be back with a full containment team. Understood? Thomas nodded, relief washing over him. Crystal clear, sir. It won't happen again. As the door closed behind the agents, Thomas sagged against it, exhaling slowly. That had been too close. "They're gone," Seraphina's soft voice came from behind him. Thomas turned, offering her a weak smile. "For now, but we can't stay here. We need to figure out our next move." Seraphina nodded, her expression serious. "Agreed. I trust you, Thomas. Lead the way." As they packed essentials into a bag, Thomas's mind raced. He had no idea where they could go, no plan beyond staying one step ahead of the authorities. But as he glanced at Seraphina, her otherworldly beauty now tinged with worry, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As Thomas and Seraphina hurried through the bustling corridors of New Horizon, adrenaline pulsed through Thomas's veins. They had managed to slip out of his apartment unnoticed, but he knew they couldn't afford to stay in the city for long. The Environmental Protection Agency would be back, and next time, they might not be so lucky. "Where are we going?" Seraphina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand trembled slightly in his as they navigated the labyrinthine streets. "We need to find somewhere off the grid, somewhere they won't think to look," Thomas replied, scanning the crowds for any sign of pursuit. "There's a place on the outskirts of the city, an old research facility. It's abandoned, mostly forgotten." Seraphina nodded, her eyes darting nervously around their surroundings. "Lead the way, Thomas. I trust you." They traveled in silence for several blocks, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the main thoroughfares. Every passerby seemed like a potential threat, every noise a potential alarm. Thomas's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. How had his life become so complicated in such a short span of time? As they approached the outskirts of the city, the towering skyscrapers gave way to crumbling buildings and overgrown vegetation. The air grew quieter, the constant hum of civilization replaced by the distant sounds of wildlife. "There," Thomas said, pointing ahead. A massive structure loomed in the distance, its faded sign barely visible through the encroaching foliage. "The old research facility. It's not much, but it should give us shelter for a while." They hurried toward the building, Seraphina's alien grace matching Thomas's urgent pace. As they approached the rusted gates, Thomas hesitated. The facility had been abandoned for years, its security systems likely offline. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We need to be cautious," Thomas warned, scanning the perimeter for any signs of movement. "Stay close to me." They slipped through a gap in the fence and cautiously approached the main entrance. The door creaked ominously as Thomas pushed it open, revealing a darkened corridor lined with dust-covered equipment. The air inside was stale and musty, a testament to years of neglect. "We should be safe here for now," Thomas said, his voice echoing faintly in the silence. "Let's find a secure room and figure out our next move." They explored the facility cautiously, checking each room for signs of habitation. Most were empty, filled only with decaying furniture and forgotten experiments. Finally, they found a small laboratory tucked away in a corner of the building. The door swung open easily, revealing a cluttered workspace littered with half-finished projects and faded blueprints. "This will do," Thomas said, gesturing for Seraphina to enter. "It's not much, but at least we'll have some privacy." Seraphina nodded gratefully, sinking onto a dusty chair. "Thank you, Thomas. I never imagined my journey would lead me here." Thomas offered her a weary smile, his mind still racing with unanswered questions. "Neither did I, Seraphina. But we're in this together now." As they settled into the makeshift sanctuary, Thomas's thoughts turned to the portal in his bathroom, the technology that had brought Seraphina to Earth. How had she traveled across the cosmos? And why had she chosen him as her genetic match? "We need to understand more about your world, Seraphina," Thomas said, breaking the silence. "About the Aquarians, about your technology. The more we know, the better chance we have of staying ahead of whoever is chasing us." Seraphina nodded, her expression serious. "I will tell you everything I can, Thomas. But first, we must secure our position here. If they find us—" Thomas's jaw tightened with determination. "They won't find us. Not if I can help it." Suddenly, a distant sound echoed through the facility, footsteps, heavy and purposeful. Thomas's heart skipped a beat as he exchanged a panicked glance with Seraphina. "They found us," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Thomas sprang into action, grabbing Seraphina's hand and pulling her toward a hidden alcove in the lab. They pressed themselves against the wall, hearts pounding in their chests as the footsteps grew louder. A shadowy figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the corridor. It was one of the EPA agents, his cybernetic implants gleaming in the darkness. "Come out, Thomas Steele," the agent called, his voice echoing ominously through the lab. "There's nowhere left to run." Thomas glanced at Seraphina, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. They were trapped, with nowhere to go. But Thomas refused to give up without a fight. "Stay behind me," Thomas whispered, his voice steady despite the rising panic. "I'll handle this." He stepped out of the alcove, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The agent leveled a scanner at him, its light flickering ominously as it analyzed his biosignature. "Where is she?" the agent demanded, his voice cold and unforgiving. Thomas hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. He could try to reason with the agent, try to buy time, but he knew that wouldn't last long. "I don't know what you're talking about," Thomas replied, his voice steady. "I'm alone here." The agent's eyes narrowed, suspicion etched on his face. "Don't play games with me, Steele. We detected her energy signature. We know she's here." Thomas's mind raced. He needed a distraction, something to buy them time to escape. And then, an idea struck him. "You're right," Thomas said suddenly, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "She's here, but she's dying." The agent hesitated, his scanner wavering slightly. "What?" "She's been injured," Thomas continued, his mind spinning the lie into existence. "I managed to bring her here, but she needs medical attention. If you take her now, she might survive." The agent's expression softened slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Why should I believe you?" Thomas swallowed hard, praying his gamble would pay off. "Because if you don't, she'll die. Is that what you want?" For a long moment, the agent studied Thomas, weighing his options. Finally, he lowered his scanner, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Fine," the agent said, his voice resigned. "Show me where she is." Thomas hesitated for a moment, glancing at Seraphina hidden in the shadows. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with silent gratitude and trust. With a deep breath, Thomas nodded. "Follow me," he said, leading the agent deeper into the labyrinthine facility. As they walked, Thomas's mind raced. They were playing a dangerous game, one slip-up away from disaster. But for now, they had bought themselves a reprieve, a chance to regroup and plan their next move. "I hope you know what you're doing, Thomas," Seraphina whispered as they hurried through the darkened corridors. "So do I," Thomas replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "So do I." As they navigated deeper into the abandoned research facility, Thomas's mind raced with possibilities. Leading the EPA agent through the maze of corridors bought them precious time, but their situation remained perilous. The agent, his cybernetic enhancements glinting in the dim light, followed closely behind, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. Thomas stole a glance back at Seraphina, who trailed silently behind them, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and determination. She trusted him implicitly, and he couldn't afford to let her down now. The plan was risky, hinging on the agent's belief that Seraphina was injured and needed immediate medical attention. As they approached a dimly lit chamber deep within the facility, Thomas slowed his pace, his mind racing for the next move. The chamber was filled with dusty consoles and long-abandoned equipment, the air thick with the scent of rust and decay. He gestured toward a makeshift cot in the corner, his voice carefully controlled. "She's here," Thomas said, his tone edged with urgency. "She's weak, but she's stable. Please, help her." The agent approached cautiously, his scanner emitting soft beeps as it analyzed the surroundings. He scrutinized Seraphina's prone form on the cot, his expression unreadable behind his visor. After a tense moment, he turned to Thomas. "If this is a trick," the agent warned, his voice low and dangerous. "It's not," Thomas interrupted, injecting as much sincerity as he could muster into his voice. "She's the key to your research. You need her alive." The agent hesitated, visibly conflicted. Thomas held his breath, praying their ruse would hold. After what seemed like an eternity, the agent finally nodded. "Call for extraction," he instructed tersely into his wrist comm. "We have the target." Relief flooded through Thomas, but he kept his expression neutral. The agent's attention was momentarily diverted as he focused on coordinating pickup for Seraphina. It was their chance to slip away. "We should go," Seraphina whispered urgently as Thomas approached her side. "Not yet," Thomas murmured back, his mind racing with a plan. "We need to make sure they're fully committed to extracting you." Seraphina nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding. They waited tensely as the agent spoke into his comm, issuing orders in clipped tones. Thomas observed his movements carefully, searching for any sign of vulnerability or distraction. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in the distance, echoing through the facility with chilling clarity. The agent's head snapped up, his focus momentarily diverted. It was their window. "Now," Thomas hissed, grabbing Seraphina's hand and bolting for the nearest exit. They sprinted through the corridors, their footsteps echoing loudly in the abandoned facility. Thomas navigated by memory, leading them toward the rear entrance he had scoped out earlier. The alarm continued to blare, adding urgency to their flight. As they burst through the final doorway, Thomas scanned their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. The area outside the facility was desolate, overgrown with tangled vegetation and devoid of life. It seemed they had managed to evade capture, at least for now. "We need to keep moving," Thomas said breathlessly, glancing back at Seraphina. "They'll realize soon enough that we've tricked them." Seraphina nodded, her gaze steady. "Where do we go now?" Thomas hesitated, weighing their options. "There's a safe house not far from here. It's isolated, off the grid. We should be able to regroup and figure out our next move." They set off at a brisk pace, sticking to the shadows and avoiding any potential observers. The adrenaline from their escape fueled their steps, driving them forward despite the uncertainty of their situation. Thomas's mind raced with questions about Seraphina's world, about the technology that had brought her to Earth, about the implications of her presence. "We need to understand more about your people, Seraphina," Thomas said as they hurried along a narrow path. "About the Aquarians, about your technology. It might be the key to staying ahead of the EPA." Seraphina nodded thoughtfully. "I will tell you everything I can, Thomas. But first, we need to ensure our safety." They reached the safe house just as darkness began to settle over the landscape. The small cabin was nestled in a secluded grove, its weathered exterior blending into the surrounding wilderness. Thomas cautiously approached the door, checking for any signs of tampering before cautiously pushing it open. Inside, the safe house was sparse but functional, stocked with basic supplies and a secure communication terminal. Thomas secured the door behind them, ensuring they were alone before turning to Seraphina. "We should be safe here for a while," Thomas said, his voice tinged with relief. "Let's figure out our next move." Seraphina nodded, sinking onto a threadbare couch. "Thank you, Thomas. I don't know what I would have done without you." Thomas offered her a weary smile, the weight of their predicament settling heavily on his shoulders. "We're in this together now, Seraphina. We'll find a way to navigate through this." As they settled into the safe house, the urgency of their escape began to ebb, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. They had eluded capture, for now, but Thomas knew their respite would be short-lived. The EPA would not give up their pursuit easily, especially with Seraphina's potential significance to their research. "We need to stay vigilant," Thomas said quietly, glancing out the window at the darkening sky. "They'll be looking for us, and they won't stop until they find us." Seraphina nodded, her expression solemn. "I understand. We can't afford to let our guard down." As they settled in for the night, Thomas's mind buzzed with unanswered questions. What had brought Seraphina to Earth? And why had she chosen him as her genetic match? The mysteries of her world and her people loomed large, casting a shadow over their uncertain future. "We'll find the answers, Seraphina," Thomas promised quietly, his voice filled with determination. "Together." Seraphina met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Thank you, Thomas. I believe in you." With that quiet affirmation, they settled into an uneasy sleep, their thoughts filled with the challenges that lay ahead. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but one thing was certain: they would face it together, bound by a shared destiny that neither could fully comprehend. And as the night deepened around them, the safe house stood silent and still, a solitary beacon of hope in a world filled with shadows. Months passed since Thomas and Seraphina found refuge in the secluded safe house. They had grown closer, their bond forged through shared hardships and the thrill of outwitting the relentless pursuit of the EPA. With each passing day, Thomas delved deeper into understanding Seraphina's world and the technology that had brought her to Earth. Together, they uncovered secrets buried deep within the Aquarian archives, learning about the advanced civilization that Seraphina hailed from and the precarious balance that governed their existence. Thomas marveled at the technological marvels described in the ancient texts, while Seraphina marveled at the resilience and ingenuity of the humans she had come to know. Their days were filled with discovery and laughter, as they explored the lush surroundings of the safe house and shared stories of their respective worlds. Seraphina taught Thomas about the healing properties of native plants, while Thomas introduced her to the intricacies of human culture and history. But their idyllic sanctuary was not to last. One morning, as they lingered over breakfast in the warmth of the safe house, a soft chime interrupted the tranquility. Thomas glanced at the secure communication terminal, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized the encrypted message. "It's from Agent Talbot," Thomas said, his voice tinged with apprehension. Seraphina looked up from her plate, her expression serious. "What does he want?" Thomas hesitated, weighing his options. "He's offering us a deal. Safe passage off Earth in exchange for Seraphina's cooperation." Seraphina's brow furrowed in thought. "Do you trust him?" Thomas considered the question carefully. Agent Talbot had pursued them relentlessly, but he had also shown moments of unexpected compassion and integrity. It was a risky proposition, but one that could potentially secure their freedom. "I think he's genuine," Thomas said finally, his voice steady. "And if there's a chance for us to leave this planet and explore the stars together." Seraphina met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with determination. "Then let's go." With a mixture of hope and trepidation, Thomas typed out their response on the terminal, accepting Agent Talbot's offer. Moments later, a confirmation came through, outlining the details of their extraction. As they prepared to leave the safe house behind, Thomas and Seraphina exchanged bittersweet farewells with the place that had been their sanctuary. They gathered their belongings and made their way to the designated rendezvous point under the cover of nightfall. Agent Talbot's team arrived precisely on schedule, their arrival marked by the soft hum of a sleek, black spacecraft descending from the starlit sky. Thomas felt a surge of awe as he beheld the advanced vessel, a testament to the technology of Seraphina's people. "You ready for this?" Thomas asked, squeezing Seraphina's hand reassuringly. She nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. "More than ready." Together, they boarded the spacecraft, leaving Earth behind as they embarked on a new chapter of their journey. As the vessel soared into the vastness of space, Thomas stole a glance at Seraphina, marveling at the future that lay ahead. Their adventures took them across distant galaxies and uncharted worlds, where they marveled at the wonders of the universe and forged friendships with beings unlike any they had encountered before. Seraphina's knowledge proved invaluable, guiding them through the intricacies of interstellar travel and diplomacy. But amidst the thrill of discovery, it was their bond that remained their anchor. Thomas and Seraphina grew closer with each passing day, their love transcending the boundaries of their respective worlds. Together, they navigated the complexities of their dual heritage, finding strength in their shared experiences and the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities. And as they gazed out at the stars from the bridge of their spacecraft, hand in hand, Thomas knew that they had found their place in the universe, together as partners in adventure and love. Thus, their journey continued, a testament to the power of hope, courage, and the enduring spirit of two souls bound by destiny across the cosmos.